Now I've showed you a lot of the technical aspects of InDesign. Now let's to the, the fun designing part. Right off the bat, I can see that this is a squished image. So I'm going to just simply right click and go fitting and fill frame proportionally. And I'm going to make sure that now those two numbers, that horizontal and that vertical percentages, are the same. Something's a little bit wrong here too. I don't have this to the bleed line, so I'm just going to click on that black tool and resize that frame to those red bleed lines. So remember, if, oh, and I also have all those extra pages. So I'm just going to click and hold down Shift and delete them. So I'm going to move that image within the frame. So actually I want it to be full bleed. So again, fitting, fill frame proportionally. And now I have that image, press W, to the full frame. I'm actually going to move it over just slightly so I get a little bit more of that. It's kind of more centered on the page. So that looks kind of centered to me. I'm just eyeballing it. Just make sure I don't move the image outside of that bleed line. So I'm just actually going to click on it and click on my arrow keys to kind of get it visually centered. I will show you centering and aligning in a different exercise because it's a bit too much for right now. So that looks good. So I have pressing, remember, the tab, W, tab, and W. Okay, so placed an image, we've resized it, the links panel, we've moved it. Now let's get some type in here. So unlike Illustrator, Photoshop, or Illustrator specifically, when you start typing on your keyboard, you actually are just hitting all the hotkeys, and so you're changing the tools and some of the functions of InDesign, or basically mostly just the tools. So you can't just click and type in InDesign. What you need to do is click on the type tool and actually draw a type text box. Now once you have a text box, then you can start typing. So in this case, it's like you have to figure out what the headline is. Play anywhere. You're just going to make this up. I don't know what you're going to say. You have to. I'm just doing this as a little example. Anytime. So use the what you learned from the headline exercise in order to write a headline. If I want to now move that text box, I have to click on the selection tool. I might want to center this text because we have this kind of nice centered alignment created by the photograph. So if I want to center that, I have to double click on the actual text itself, and I can use my top control here. I can align center, or if I go into my paragraph panel too, I can align center. If I now want to move this text box to its actual center of the page, there's this really handy tool called alignment, and it is, where is it? Object. Nope, object and layout align. And I wasn't going to show you this, but it's just so useful, I think, for the design of this this ad. This align panel allows you to now align anything to each other, to a page, to other objects, to margins, whatever. So, but we just have to, the only thing you have to be right off the bat, be super aware of is what you're aligning to it. So if I click on this text box and I go align to center, right, left, top, you'll see that is actually, I think it is centered to the page right now, or sorry, aligned to the page. So if I click on that text box, you'll see that that text box, the text box is actually aligned to the center of the page. And since we have the paragraph or the text alignment is centered, if you click on align to the center of the page, it works fine. But say for instance, I have it clicked to margins, you'll see here, I click turn on my margins so you can see it actually works fine. But say for instance I had this text aligned left, and now if I click on my arrow and I align it to the center of the page, it's not going to be quite right. So we also need to make sure that the text is aligned to the center aligned, and then the text box is aligned to the center of the page. Just so you know, if I can also just align things to each other. So for instance, if I want this, that circle and that text to be centered to each other, I can align it to the selection. So selection just means whatever I have selected. So if I center that, so now you can see that they're actually not aligned to the page at all. If I had multiple objects, I'm just going to show you just right off the bat what this looks like. So I had multiple objects. If I now space them, there's a lot of things we can do with this. So, but right off the bat, we want, I'm just going to delete that, make sure I've selected that. Delete. I just want to center this text, so I want to make sure that it's centered, aligned to the text itself, and I want to make sure that that text box is now aligned to the page. So align to page and center. And then I'm just going to drag it down a little bit because it's over the basketball hoop, obviously. So now that it's centered to page, I don't want to mess with the alignment, so I'm going to hold down the Shift key when I click and drag, and that's going to perfectly hold it in a 90-degree angle. 90-degree angles or 45-degree, but if I just move, move the text box with my holding down nothing, I just can move it anywhere. But if I want to center align it to the page and then drag it, I have to hold down the Shift key. Now obviously this is pretty small text, so I'm just going to change the size of it. I can do that in my character panel. I can do that on the top control here. Minion Pro is the default, so change it, please, please, please. Change it to anything but besides Minion Pro. I do not care as long as it works for the audience and the brand. Change it to something different besides Minion Pro. Now we can do the size, the font size up here, up here. We can change it to all caps. I highly recommend avoiding all caps. If you really are loving all caps and you think it adds emphasis to the design, by all means use them, but I think personally I think they're overused. So I have to resize that, realign that. I personally think they just aren't a little bit overdone, so I don't particularly like them. So if I accidentally move that somewhere else, I can just realign. I can click and drag, hold down the Shift key and move that. I'll show you in the next video a few more type tool stuff.